Ancient folklore, psychic channeling, military secrecy, and extraordinary claims of contact with something otherworldly all collide in a small village outside Sofia, Bulgaria. What exactly did they find in that hole in Tsarichina? I'm Carol Ann. Welcome to The In-Between. Operation Sunray has had issues from the start. The only blessing they've had so far is that the whole thing is taking place in a small village with maybe 100 people total, miles away from Sofia, Bulgaria's capital. They've been in Tsarichina. Just a quick PSA to let you guys know that this is the last time that you will hear me say the word Tsarichina correctly in this entire video. No judging. Now, back to our scheduled programming. About 15 miles to the northwest of Sofia for almost 2 years. The operation began back on December 6th of 1990 with the initial goal to dig into the earth and find the buried treasure of King Samuel, rumored to be hidden in the area for centuries. The digging had been round the clock, with soldiers fighting an uphill battle in the frozen ground of winter. Colonel Tsarichina Hole was absolutely the right man to get this done. As the deputy head of the Bulgarian military's scientific department, he was rational enough and commanding enough to keep the project moving. Because Kunev knows this is not really about a buried treasure. That's just the cover story. It's really about the fate of humanity. From the very beginning, the sense of urgency prompted an extreme decision. Since this seems to be a metaphysical matter, let's call in some metaphysical help. They had a meeting with Baba Vanga, the famed Bulgarian seer called a modern Nostradamus. She warned them, there is a being down there. It is not a man. It is not a woman. She described the being as a yellow-haired monkey in a state of suspended animation, warning that it should not be disturbed because humanity is not yet ready for its genetic or spiritual secrets. She asks them, I ask what you will do when it wakes up and speaks. But that is evidently not a satisfactory answer to the men who make the decisions. Instead, they brought in Marina Napolitanova, daughter of Colonel Napolitanov, Kunev's immediate superior. She was a proven psychic who had visions since she was a child, visions of this very project. She channels an entity named Kiki, who warns of danger below. Kunev also brought in Elizaveta Loginova, Ellie for short, who channels a different being, an ancient being named Roro, who speaks of a portal, advanced ancient tech, and an entity responsible for the creation of life on Earth. This has been anything but an easy assignment for Kunev. Spent almost 2 full years of managing the digging instructions in response to ever-changing directions from their ancient disembodied guides, with Kiki wanting them to stop and Roro wanting them to keep going. Not to mention things like new excavation equipment not working and communication lines that were always either failing or, when they did work, the line was always filled with this ghostly whisper. And the strange things being reported to him by both soldiers and villagers. A growing feeling of dread the deeper they dug. Glowing balls of light moving over the dig site as if on some kind of reconnaissance mission. And a low, persistent hum that induced headaches, nausea, and fear. Soldiers were reporting shadows darting around, some about 1 foot tall, but some as tall as 7 feet. And the disappearance of a guard out to check the perimeter had everyone on edge, with whispers of curses and vengeful entities from Bulgarian folklore. It could be the Samodivi, beautiful little nymphs who can create glowing balls of light. Or maybe it's the Karankanjul, little goblins that can cause hallucinations and small darting shadows. Or perhaps it's the Talasumi, protective entities that curse those who dig up or disturb sacred underground sites. They certainly had many physical obstacles along the way, When they hit a huge rectangular slab, the guides warned them that it was a bioshield coated with dangerous bacteria. With continuous disinfection, they managed to break through. But despite all of that craziness, Kunev made sure they kept digging. 2 years of boring into the earth, only using picks, shovels, and the occasional explosive, has forged a spiraling, twisting tunnel plunging over 200 feet down and 500 feet long. And even though their guides are still conflicted between warnings to stop and urges to continue for knowledge, today is the day. Today, November 19th, 1992, is the day when they will find out what they have been striving for. What is this metaphysical treasure they have worked so hard to uncover? The team descends down a spiral tunnel. They hit a smooth, vibrating stone barrier that seems impervious to breach with their tools. Kunev orders explosives. It works. On the far side of the rubble is a polished spiral tunnel with carved steps and ancient symbols on the walls. As the party descends deeper, the air grows heavy and cold, and Marina tries to shut out the voices in her head telling them to stop. This information is not for you. But she keeps walking. The need to know what secrets about the origin of humanity await them proves stronger than the warnings from the otherworldly intelligence in her head. The group finally enters a chamber with mirror-smooth walls, and at the far end, a glowing slab that almost seems to be alive. But as they look closer, they see more than just a slab. Inside, they see a large, reddish humanoid figure floating inside, as if in some kind of stasis. This is it. This is the treasure. This being is the beginning of human life on Earth, and it's awake. A few soldiers try to advance toward the humanoid, only to be repelled by some kind of force field that throws them against the opposite wall so hard that they are killed on impact. Chaos erupts as soldiers start firing at the entity in the wall, but the bullets just bounce off the force field. At the same time, several other men just fall to the ground dead for no apparent reason. The room starts filling with some kind of fog, and Colonel Kunev orders everyone to retreat. As the few remaining of the group lucky enough to make it out of the chamber start scrambling up the twisting, turning tunnel, they hear a low humming and vibration within the walls. As survivors breach the surface and gasp for fresh air, Colonel Kunev realizes that the warnings should have been heeded. Whatever it is that they just found is obviously nothing they are even close to understanding. His only question is, did they just chicken out on the greatest discovery in the history of mankind? Or were they just pawns in a game of cosmic chess they didn't even know they were playing? Were the forces urging them on to find this treasure working to enlighten the human race? Or was this entire 2-year ordeal a trap from the start laid by something wanting to unleash its own power across the globe? Either way, good or evil, Kunev decides this is way beyond our ability to comprehend. He orders the tunnel sealed. Not just by filling it back in. He wants it sealed forever. He orders all the cement he can find and dumps it all down that hole. The only question is that enough? Will that be enough to deter any future treasure hunters from making the same mistake they did? Because there is no doubt that whatever that entity is that they uncovered is still down there waiting for its next chance at freedom. Wow, that is a great story, which is why it's been covered by so many of our favorite channels and podcasts. Is it true? With every fiber of my being, I want it to be true, but I don't think it is. The best parts are completely unverifiable. However, as usual, there's more to the story And it's pretty crazy. In this case, even without the awesome dramatic flair, the real events surrounding this whole series of events merits, on a scale of 1 to 10, at least a 7 in my book. Well worth exploring. So what do we have that's verifiable? Well, we have a book written by Colonel Kunev about the entire affair. It's only in Bulgarian and not available anywhere that I can find, but I did find a Bulgarian website that has published a huge chunk of it. And just a note, Ellie, the psychic who was channeling Ro, also wrote a book. But again, it's not available anywhere that I could find. We do have a 2-part documentary from a Bulgarian program called No Man's Land that featured Tsarichina interviewing news reporters and locals, as well as another documentary from Bulgaria TV. We also have a 42-page report written in 1994 from a group called the Foundation for Cosmonoetic Investigations. That report compiles eyewitness accounts, official documents, expert analysis, and various interpretations of the events that happened there. So what picture do all of these verifiable sources paint for us? An amazing Bulgarian soap opera. The real story is seriously almost as amazing as the Steven Spielberg version. Settle in, kids. Here we go. Bulgaria in 1990 is a very interesting place. They've just thrown off decades of communist rule, but are still scrambling to figure out what their new democracy is going to look like. The economy is in ruins, inflation is soaring, and the political scene is a nightmare. We also have to consider the background of the Bulgarian people, especially those who've grown up in the smaller villages. The evil eye is still a very real thing for them. Going to a psychic is as normal as going to a doctor. And the answers and instructions they get from their psychics are probably trusted more than the ones they get from their doctor. So I guess it shouldn't be a big surprise that the Bulgarian government had a lot of people in it who took the opinions of psychics and the idea of ethereal guides delivering important messages through dreams very seriously. Enter one Dmitry Kakemenov, who grew up in Tsarichina but now lives right next door in Gradets. Total squirrel moment. I was looking on Google Earth at the roads to Gradets and Tsarichina to see how far off the beaten path they really are, when I see this totally random hairpin turn in the road leading to both villages. So I thought, wow, there must be a hill or a big chunk of solid rock or something in the way. So I went into Street View to check, and nope. They just decided to make it a fun drive, I guess. Anyway, Dmitry starts having dreams that the ghosts of old 19th century Bulgarian revolutionary heroes are telling him that he descends from Tsar Samuel, the heroic 11th century emperor who battled the Byzantines. And did he ever? This guy was a busy boy. But rumors have been handed down for centuries that Samuel buried a large treasure somewhere in the Tsarichina area. And the revolutionaries are now telling Dmitry that he has the responsibility to find it as a way to help restore Bulgaria to its former glory. Now, Dmitry just happens to know a guy named Staman Stamanov, who just happens to be a part of a bunch of people trying to get an official group started called the Phenomena Association, whose mission would be to research and investigate paranormal activities, UFO phenomena, and unexplained phenomena, including bioenergetic, psychic, and cosmic intelligence contacts. Now, our guy Stamanov isn't just part of this new group. He's also an engineer for the Ministry of Defense. So, let's zoom out for a second so I can map this out for you. Everything that we are going to talk about today are all machinations within the Ministry of Defense. So, you have the president and the prime minister, who have their various cabinet members, so to speak. So the guy in charge of defense is Dmitry Lujev. His chief of staff, overseeing the various departments, is Raju Minchev. One of those departments is the scientific department, headed up by Colonel Delcho Georgiev Naplatanov. And under him is Colonel Tsvetko Kunev. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot of names at you right now, but I just need you to understand the hierarchy. So in October of 1990, so a month before the Phenomena Association became an official organization, Stamanov, the engineer, goes to his boss and friend, Kunev, and says, hey, I'm part of this group and we want to start this organization, but it would be awesome if we had the backing of the Defense Department. Kunev says, let me see what I could do, and sets up a meeting with his boss, Naplatinov, and brings another of the group members named Dmitry Sirikov, who happens to be a psychic. Now, speaking of psychics, Naplatinov's daughter just happens to be the one and only psychic Marina, the one from our story that channeled Kiki. So we know that he's very open to the general idea of psychics. Whatever happened in that meeting must have convinced Naplatinov, because he arranges a meeting with his boss, Minchev. And it's about this time, about early November, that Marina starts getting her communications from Kiki, letting her know that something big is about to go down. Now, I'm going down into the weeds a bit here, but I think it's a very important backstory to understand the dynamic being set up between the group of psychics. So Kiki tells Marina that something big is going down, and that the Association of United Civilizations, an intergalactic organization, wants us to hold a conference with them on February 27th, 1992, and gives her a list of 188 topics we need to talk about. Kiki takes down the list and is told to give that list to Dmitry Sirikov, the guy from the Phenomena Association. But as it turns out, Dmitry takes the list, but keeps it under wraps, not sharing the information with anyone, on orders from Roro. That's right! Here is where our Roro channeling psychic Ellie comes back into the picture. So, are we getting vibes of some kind of beef between Kiki and Roro? The Phenomena Association gets its approval to be a real organization and is officially founded on November 21st, 1990. And they get their meeting with Minchev. I'm not sure who was all there, but it did include psychic Dmitry and another psychic named Dora Petrova. It did not include Colonel Naplatinov. Dmitry and Dora tell Minchev about Dmitry Kakemenov's dreams about the treasure of Samuel. Minchev tells his deputy, Naplatinov, hey, can you meet with this guy and find out what's going on? On December 4th, Naplatinov meets with Dmitry, and Dora, and immediately goes to his boss, Minchev. This guy's telling the truth. I'm convinced. Minchev tells him, okay, go away for now and come back and see me later. In the meantime, Dmitry goes to see Ellie. When Colonel Naplatinov, I'm just going to call him the Colonel from now on. It's way easier. Goes back to see his boss later, as he was instructed to do. There sits Dmitry telling Minchev that Roro has a very important message for him. Ellie comes to Minchev's office immediately at his request and sits down for a 2-hour seance with him while the colonel sits in the waiting room. When they come out, they say Roro says the treasure is real. However, it's not gold. It's the key to life on Earth. Here are the maps of where you'll find it, and you have 3 days to do it. The next day, they're getting ready for a hasty site visit. The colonel asks Dmitry if his daughter Marina can come along. Whoever Dmitry is channeling says, sure, and a call is put into Ellie to ask her/Roro if it's okay. And they say sure. So the colonel, his daughter, Dmitry, and Dora all head out to Tsarichina to try to pinpoint the spot where they're supposed to start digging. When they get back, the colonel reports to Minchev, his boss, with the help of Marina and Dmitry, we've found the spot. Minchev tells the colonel, I know. Ellie called and says Roro says, you're right. So the next day, December 6th, the colonel, his deputy Kunev, Marina, and Dmitry, along with a team of engineers, head out to Tsarichina. They roll up, cordon off an area in the middle of the village, and put up perimeter fencing and camouflage, and start to dig. Communications are a problem from the start. Brand new equipment is breaking down. Some people even report that the mechanic trying to figure out the problem looks like he's possessed by a robot. not his usual self. Dora arrives on the scene quite a while later and tells everyone that Minchev wants to see them all in his office right now. When they all get there, Ellie is there as well. Ellie says Roro has a choice for Kiki: war or peace. Kiki does not agree to the ultimatum, presumably to work together in peace. Now, that makes it sound like Kiki is the bad guy for not agreeing to peace. But then while Marina is still in her head channeling Kiki, Ellie and Dora start making energy disrupting hand motions around Marina, trying to interrupt her connection. Then Ellie starts to openly mock Marina and tells everyone in the room that Minchev has decided to dismiss the colonel and his daughter. The colonel says, "You know what? That's fine. In fact, I'd really like to take that vacation I have waiting for me." And so ends the close and personal involvement of the Neplatonovs. Marina was only on the dig site for 2 days. However, according to the colonel, this is not the end for Marina. In a complaint letter he sent to Minchev, he says Marina continued to receive information from Kiki at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. every day, which she religiously transcribed into journals. December 26th, the colonel's vacation is over and he heads back to work. He's called to his boss Minchev's office, where Minchev asks him, "Did you know that the USSR possesses a weapon more dangerous than a nuke? A Lipton weapon." If you hang out in conspiracy theory Reddit threads, you'll know that the Lipton weapon, elsewhere referred to as the E-Lipton weapon, is a device designed to manipulate human minds and induce psychological effects like hallucination and suicidal impulses through electromagnetic fields or biosensory influence. Vladimir Zhirinovsky, a member of the Russian State Duma, which is like our House of Representatives, claims to have supplied these things, known as atomic pistols, to Serbian forces in 1994 as a psychotronic weapon. Not to mention the fact that Russia's research into mind-controlled devices appears in declassified documents and historical analysis from the 1970s onward. So that's actually slightly plausible. In any event, that same night, Marina tells her dad that she was busy channeling Kiki that afternoon, and Dmitri broke into the channel and told her that Minchev says he wants to see all of her journals. The colonel tells Marina, "I don't think so." But when he gets home from work the next day, Marina is a mess. She tells him she's being psychically harassed by Dmitri, that he's hurling insults and threats against her life, telling her to go jump off a bridge, telling her that her dad would be grateful if she was gone. Trying their best to help, Stamen Stamanov, remember the Ministry of Defense engineer who was also in the Phenomena Association? Well, he brought over another psychic named Dr. Stoylov, who has already delivered a letter to Minchev telling him that they know of the plan to kill Marina, and if they didn't stop harassing her, they'd be in trouble. While at the colonel's house with Marina, Dr. Stoylov channels into the connection between Marina and Dmitri, telling Dmitri to stop his assault on Marina. Dmitri's answer? Make me. What is this? Bulgarian psychic Jerry Springer? They continue until February 8th, 1991, when Marina jumps off a 10th-story balcony. Her death is recorded as, let's just say, a voluntary action on her part. But the colonel believes until the day he dies that Marina was psychically targeted. Now, whether Marina was a target of psychical assault that convinced her to jump from the balcony, or just a case of severe mental instability cloaked in the guise of the paranormal, we'll never know. However, it is interesting to note that Colonel Neplatonov was also found dead about 18 months later from jumping off a bridge in Sofia. And the same question remains. Was he just so heartbroken by the death of Marina that he chose to jump off the bridge? Or was there an outside voice screaming in his head that forced him to? We'll never know. But we do know that the one who started the psychic catfight, Ellie, is still alive, and that her statement about the colonel and his daughter being eliminated came true, and that she goes on to become the central figure in the dig moving forward. It should be noted that, according to the colonel, other people in the Ministry of Defense do not take kindly to Ellie either, that she's an awful person, and she's married to someone employed in the Ministry of Defense.
Well, how convenient.
But I have to say that this is all speculation on my part. It's all a big he said, she said. All we know is that the dig continues. Obviously, the dig, or Operation Sunray, Lightbeam, or Glory, depending on who you're talking to, takes more than just 3 days. For whatever reason, Roro just keeps granting them extensions. Now, once Marina is out of the picture, it's down to Ellie, Dmitri, and Dora. Dmitri and Dora eventually fall out, leaving everything happening on the shoulders of Ellie. According to the book published by Colonel Kunev, every day Ellie receives instructions from Roro, and every day Ellie relays those instructions to Colonel Kunev, who seems to be the one in charge on site every day. Wherever Roro tells them to dig, they dig. But that could mean going left one day and right the next. So the tunnel starts looking like an underground Etch-a-Sketch. They actually do see Baba Vanga at one point. Now, some people say that what she told them is what I mentioned about the yellow-haired monkey earlier, but others say she told them something about a crystal deep underground that protects the earth. The truth is, we really have no idea what she said. But they keep digging day after day, even though sometimes Roro pretty much just tells them, yeah, those directions I gave you yesterday, I was just kidding. We really want to go this other way. So they put up with this petulant child's antics because they believe. Not only do they believe in the existence of what they now call object number 1, but they have some proof to back it up. Those digging claim that, for the most part, they weren't creating a new tunnel into the bedrock. They were just cleaning out a structure that was already there. This is Reina. She owns a little shop in Tsarichina that is referred to in this documentary from Bulgarian TV as the news shop. In other words, it's the local pub, and Reina has heard a lot of loose lips, as every pub owner does. It's already dug out, he says. We were just cleaning it. And he says it was covered up, buried, he says. It was filled with something, and they actually took out the debris. They believe that tunnel was built by someone before them, and that they are truly on the brink of uncovering the secret to humanity itself. And Ellie keeps writing. Every day, she diligently copies down in notebooks everything that Roro tells her. By the time she's done, she will fill 800 pages of writings and drawings. And the writings are a mix of symbols, blending Egyptian, Sumerian, Chinese, Japanese, Old Bulgarian, runic, and astrological elements, plus text in modern Bulgarian discussing humanity's origins, impending global catastrophes, medical and scientific breakthroughs, and warnings about what lies below. Now, when I read all of this about what really went down, I started to wonder if this whole thing was an extremely elaborate ruse by a narcissistic woman who wanted to feel important. Or a bunch of people scrambling to do whatever they think will keep them in the good graces of the government, since things were a little dicey on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not alone in thinking that most of this is due to a magnetic personality by Ellie. In the words of Dmitry Luchev, Minister of Defense for part of the dig saga. But all of this was suggestion, in my opinion, just suggestion. Because of that, it was I met this woman, Logivina, and I was left with the impression that she is very strong. She possessed a very strong power of suggestion, very strong. She knew how to inspire some kind of trust. But then I realized that there are reports of things that happened outside the dig site, things that had plenty of witnesses and that the military had zero control over. There are things that exist today that show something happened over there. First of all, a website called governmentaddict.org has a list of all Freedom of Information Act requests of the CIA for the year 2008. Now, this is a list of everything. It's kind of interesting to scroll through and see some of the things that people are requesting. But buried in this long list of requests is this one non-remarkable request. Operation from 12/06/1990 to 11/19/1992, carried out by the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense near the village of Tsarichina in the western region of Kostanbrod, Bulgaria, in excavating object number 1. Now, that may not prove much, but it does prove that the dig happened and that it was a big enough deal within the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense that the CIA paid attention. And then there's all the weird things that happened to the villagers. Reports start coming in from the villagers and the soldiers alike. Glowing orbs, UFOs, poltergeist activity, low-frequency humming causing headaches, nausea, insomnia, and dread, crackling static electricity in the air, shadowy 7 to 8 foot giants moving along fields at night, tiny 6 to 12-inch green-blue beings darting around, disembodied voices on landline phones, and the dogs going nuts. In June of 1992, Elka Kirova was just sitting at home with her dogs when the dogs start making a ruckus. She looks out the window, wondering what's going on that would set the dogs off, and sees a flaming red elliptical object with rhomboid protrusions. I don't know exactly what that means, but okay. She watches this thing for about 5 minutes as it floats about 12 to 15 feet off the ground, moving toward the Tsarichina dig site. And the next day, Elka is just wiped out, like she's been zapped of any energy to do anything. At the end of May 1992, Daniil Doichev is living in a nearby village. Full transparency, the report lists a village that I cannot find on the map, so I'm going to assume the report is mistaken somehow, and that since his account is in the report, that he's from somewhere in the area. Anyway, he's asleep and he gets woke up by an intense light coming in from the window. He gets up to check it out and sees in his backyard a dark cone-shaped object about 20 feet high. He runs out the back door and tries to approach this thing, but as he gets closer, he hears a muffled sound and flames start shooting out of the base as it starts to float away. The next morning, Daniil finds a round circle of crushed grass several feet in diameter. On November 27th, 1991, about 6 o'clock in the evening, Treko Koliev, who lives in a village called Bankya, sees something in the sky over his head and sees a bright white flash. The next thing he knows, it's midnight, and he's now in the village of Meshtitsa, which is like 8 miles away as the crow flies and 25 miles away by car. And he has zero idea how he got there. Now, these last few specific reports come from a document from 1994 called Tsarichina Case, Facts and Documents, Opinions and Hypothesis, which is a 42-page report from a group of different people from different areas talking about what happened in Tsarichina. They say that 26 of 27 UFO cases they looked at occurred between December of 1990 and August of 1993, so for a little while after the dig was shut down. I do feel the need to point out that the 27th case actually occurred in the winter of 1953-54 when parish priest Boris Angelkov, serving Tsarichina, saw something that looked like a saucer with cover land near the village. As he kept watching, 3 humanoid figures came out of the saucer that Father Boris described as Santa Clauses. I knew he was real. The report goes on to say that the level of credibility of the witnesses of the other 26 incidents is very high. Members of parliament, government employees, students, and even priests, with most of them saying something to the effect of, "If I had not seen it myself, I would not believe it." And the military has several reports between 1990 and 1991 of something popping up on their radar hovering over Tsarichina. Not to mention the rumors of soldiers encountering shadows in the tunnels themselves. One villager talked about hearing the sound of gunfire coming from the tunnels at night. But let's get back to the actual dig. By the summer of 1992, word gets to journalist Dmitry Statkov from the newspaper Noshtin Trud that something funky is going on in Tsarichina. He drives up there and is chased away by soldiers with guns. He thinks, well, that's odd. What the hell is going on here? So 2 hours later, he drives up again, but this time with a photographer, incentivized by the promise of lots of beer. I like this guy already. Who secretly takes the only known photos of the site. Well, almost. We'll get to that in a bit. And the whole experience inspires Dmitry to start researching and reporting the goings-on in Tsarichina, racking up over 70 articles by the fall of 1992. By this time, Bulgaria has a new constitution, and the craziness around the change in government has died down, allowing those in the government to start thinking about other things. And thanks to Dmitry, government eyeballs start looking at the dig. A commission convenes on September 12th, 1992 to talk about what is going on here. What exactly are we looking for? Geologists talk about how there are no artificial structures in the area, and archaeologists talk about how there is no cultural, historical value in where they are digging. But psychiatrists argue that Ellie and Marina are completely competent with no severe mental illness or evidence of manipulation on their part. And that the connection between object number 1, the contactees, and the phenomena of automatic writing shows there is a real psychotronic connection involving extraterrestrials, or at least a higher intelligence that needs to be studied. But eventually, the government bean counters decide that the money should not be being spent on this never-ending project that has produced 0 results. So, Operation Sunray gets a pink slip. But before they close it up for good, they let the press come to the site and go down into the hole for themselves. And the first one in line? Dmitry Statkov, the first reporter to run with the story. These are the only other photos besides those clandestine ones that were taken in the spring. According to him, he and his colleague go all the way down to the end where the tunnel just stops. And that's it. Some of the locals are also given the opportunity to go down. Reina is one of them, but after hearing about a female reporter feeling sick before she even hit the ladder, Reina chickened out. Can't say I blame her. So, on November 19th, 1992, after nearly 2 years and roughly $19 to $20 million in today's equivalent, the digging stops. The tunnel is filled with concrete. Most of the documentation, reports, photos, film, including Ellie's numerous journals, are confiscated, classified, and are now either lost or destroyed. Although rumor has it that Ellie's journals left the country into the hands of some other government with more resources to study them. Okay, we're going to take a little time out right here, and I'm going to share just a little inside baseball on getting all of the pieces together for an episode like this. Usually, I start looking around for sources and information and then construct a rough outline of how I want to tackle the subject. Then, when I'm actually writing the script, I bounce around here and there and fill in different parts of the outline either as information comes in or flat out as I feel like tackling each part. And then kind of smooth the pieces together at the end. So on this script, one of the last things I wanted to discuss is where the hole is now. Is it a real place we can go visit? So I dug into it, found out that there is a rock there that says Object the Hole to mark the spot. Okay, but I dug a little deeper and found a website called strangeminds.au that makes the case that the exact spot is a few feet away under some little, what looks to be some kind of utility building. The idea being that they built this building on top of the entrance to the tunnel so no one would ever be able to get in. And even the No Man's Land documentary that we used as a source highlights that same building. Now keep in mind, this is one of the last sections of the script, but it is not the last section I worked on. I worked on this pretty early on in the process. So I'm thinking, okay, I think I'm onto something interesting here. But after looking at the pictures myself, I beg to differ and think the opening is right where the rock is. Okay, it was a fun investigation. So I take about probably an hour or more to write up how this website makes the case or not for the location of the hole and include my take on the whole thing. I take screenshots of the photos. I clip the video of the tower from the No Man's Land documentary. Great. That part's done, and I move on to the next section I need to work on. Then as I'm working on another part of the script, I see this other original photo, also in the No Man's Land documentary, taken back at the time of the dig. And right there, in front of my face, is the utility building. It's been there the whole time. So they couldn't have built the building to cover the entrance. The building was already there. Meaning, I just wasted all of that time for nothing. Ugh. So that means, based on the photos of the tent covering the hole's entrance, it pretty much has to be right where the rock is. But it's really hard to line things up perfectly using Google Earth. So if you make it to the rock, you are in the right area no matter what. Now, I didn't tell you all that for sympathy or anything. I love my job. Just a little inside scoop on how crazy it is sometimes when researching the mysterious corners of the world. So we know that the rock is, at the very least, close to that spot. Dmitry Stratkov remembers it being a little further back in the field. Okay, but remember, the tunnel was over 500 feet long. Could they really have cemented up the whole thing? So, who is going to start the fundraiser to get some ground-penetrating radar over there?
It's a moral imperative.
So what happened here? Well, I've already put up one theory that Ellie was just an attention-seeking narcissist, but that's just my opinion. And hear me when I say that does not mean I am rejecting the whole story. Two things can be going on at the same time. Even though she looks like a very sweet lady, she could be a narcissist in the middle of an environment full of paranormal activity. I'm totally on board with that. But others call out the whole story as BS, claiming this was all a really elaborate scheme to bilk the government out of millions of dollars at a time when most government officials were a little preoccupied with rebuilding Bulgaria. That certainly is possible. Or that it was a way for government officials to take what they thought was the popular road with their superiors to keep themselves employed at a time when that was far from certain. Remember, a good chunk of Bulgarians believe in the paranormal. So, was it delusion born of crisis? A money scheme? Or genuine contact opening a door to deeper knowledge? The concrete cap remains in place, and Tsarichina is once again quiet. Ali Lugivina spent years trying to get people to go back and start digging again. And she maintains to this day that the dig was never about the dig. It was about the establishment of communication with a more advanced civilization, the start of a relationship. But with all this being said and all of the analysis that's been done, one question still haunts me. Why fill in the hole with concrete? Why go out of your way to make sure no one can ever dig there again? Unless there really is something terrifying waiting at the bottom. All these Cyrillic names have been very challenging, so forgive me if I didn't hit them all exactly right.
I know nothing. Nothing.
It's been a fun ride, but I just don't know if I can buy this one. So you tell me, is this legit or not? If you would like to explore more nooks and crannies of our weird world, click right here. You might be a little surprised at the weirdness you find. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.